Most people who survive major economic shifts don't see them coming. They're already positioned before the alarm sounds. That's the whole idea behind what I call the quiet operator. And it's worth being precise about what that means, because it's not a mindset, it's not a vibe, and it's not another word for hustle. It's a specific posture, a specific set of moves, and once you see it clearly, you'll recognize immediately whether you're operating that way or not. Let me start with what it isn't. The loud version of career protection right now looks like this. Someone reads 3 articles about AI, spends a weekend on a prompt engineering course, posts about it on LinkedIn, and calls themselves future-proof. That's not positioning, that's performance. And performance without substance is actually a liability because it signals that you're reacting, that you didn't see this coming, and now you're scrambling to catch up. The quiet operator doesn't post about what they're building, they build it. The distinction sounds small. It isn't. Here's what the posture actually looks like in practice. A quiet operator is a mid-career professional, typically somewhere between 35 and 50, who has accumulated real domain expertise, real institutional knowledge, real relationships. They've spent a decade or more getting good at something that matters. And now, instead of finding every argument after with them, putting something more interesting, they're learning to operate a tool that beginning the field and using that combination, domain knowledge passively, to become the person in their own who can do what nobody else can quite teach that. That's a very specific competitive position. It doesn't require you to become a programmer. It doesn't require a career pivot. It requires you to recognize that your accumulated expertise is not obsolete. It's actually the thing that makes you dangerous if you attach the right capabilities to it. Let me make this concrete. There's a financial analyst, 15 years of experience reading balance sheets, understanding industry cycles, knowing which numbers to trust and which to interrogate. She is not being replaced by a language model, but someone who has her 15 years of judgment and knows how to use AI to process 3 times the data in half the time, to draft the first version of the memo in minutes, to fly anomalies across a dataset she never would have had time to audit manually. That person is operating at a level that's genuinely hard to replicate. She became a quiet operator not by abandoning what she knew, but by multiplying it. The quiet part of that equation matters. Here's why. There's a version of this transition that plays out publicly. The person who makes their AI adoption a performance, who announces every new tool they've tried, who wants credit for the learning before the learning produces results. That person is optimizing for perception, and perception without output is fragile. The moment the tools change or the results don't materialize, the credibility evaporates. The quiet operator optimizes for output. They let the work speak. They show up to the meeting with the analysis already done. They deliver the project 2 days early. They solve the problem that everyone else said would take 3 weeks. And over time, they defend the person that leadership quietly reps the hard problems to. Not because of their title, not because of what they've claimed, but because of their track record. That's leverage, and it compounds. But here's what nobody tells you about this kind of positioning. The window for building it quietly is genuinely time-limited. Not in a fear-mongering way. I'm not going to tell you that your job disappears next Tuesday, but capability gaps close. The person who builds fluency with AI systems now, while most of their peers are still skeptical or overwhelmed, will have a lead time of 12 to 24 months on the people who wait until it's obvious. And in most professional environments, that kind of lead time is enough to determine who gets pulled into the new structure and who gets managed out of it. The quiet operator doesn't wait for the obvious. They move before the urgency is visible to everyone else. Now let's talk about the second dimension of this, because it's one that most career advice completely ignores. A quiet operator doesn't just protect their job. They build income and leverage that exists outside of it. Not dramatically, not by quitting and starting a startup, but by recognizing that dependence on a single employer is itself a vulnerability and systematically reducing that dependence over time without blowing up their current role. This might look like consulting on the side in their area of expertise. It might look like building a small audience around a specific professional niche. It might look like creating a tool or resource that generates a modest recurring income. It might look like advising an early-stage company in their sector 1 day a month. The specific form matters less than the underlying logic. Multiple income sources, even small ones. Change your relationship to your primary employer in ways that are hard to describe until you've experienced them. When you don't desperately need a job, you show up differently. You speak more honestly in meetings. You push back when something is wrong. You take intelligent risks instead of playing it safe to protect your position. Paradoxically, the person with outside options often becomes more valuable inside, because they operate from a place of quiet confidence rather than quiet fear. That's the operator mindset applied to income architecture, not a dramatic leap, a patient accumulation. One more thing worth naming, because it gets at the psychology of this. The quiet operator is not disengaged. They're not coasting. They're not doing the minimum while they plot their escape. They're fully committed to their current role, often more effective in it than they've ever been, while simultaneously building capabilities and options that exist beyond it. Those two things are not in tension. In fact, capabilities they're building usually make them better at the job they have, which made the job more sustainable of the options develop. This is a patient game. It doesn't produce results in a week, but compounded over 12 months, the person who operates this way becomes nearly unrecognizable from the person who didn't. So here is the one thing you can do today. Not a course, not a tool, not a framework, just an honest audit. Sit down and answer 2 questions. If your employer restructured tomorrow and had to cut one layer of your function, how clearly could you articulate what would be lost if you specifically were gone? Not your role, but you. And second, outside of your salary, what income or leverage do you actually have right now? If both answers are uncomfortable, that's not a crisis. It's information. And information, acted on early, is the whole advantage. The quiet operator doesn't wait for the alarm. They're already positioned when it sounds. That's it. That's the whole idea. And everything on this channel is about building that position, specifically, practically, without hype, for people who are good at what they do and want to stay that way.